Hi, Insiders. My name's Nia, and today we are going to kick off a wonderful series in which we are going to learn about the menstrual cycle from a completely different perspective than probably what you learned in the fifth grade when you had that boring or rather embarrassing educational video. So I'm going to pause here for a couple of minutes for those of you who want to tune in live. Otherwise, we'll get started in the next minute or so. We are doing this four-week mini series in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and the purpose of it is to help you get in tune with your body so you can understand its subtleties and learn to take care of it from a completely different perspective in which we've been taught by Western medicine or maybe the education stopped at the fifth grade for you like it did for me. So this mini series will cover a series of topics in which we will learn how to eat for our cycle, how to exercise for our cycle, how to prevent PMS, and how to supplement for those PMS symptoms to be eliminated, because it's totally possible to have a period without PMS. So I'm super excited to share more on this topic. So I will get started in about a moment or so. Okay, so today, for week one of this mini series, I'm going to start with just giving you an overview of the four phases. I'm sure we've heard like the words follicular and luteal and menstrual phase, but we might not know what they mean. So the whole thing that I want to, my goal for this series is to help you become more empowered in all of your phases. There's actually four phases of our cycle, rather than a slave to those adjustments in your hormones. Because, like I just said a moment ago, it is totally, you're totally able to have a period without having PMS symptoms. So, the four phases can be described as the menstrual phase. This is where you are actually bleeding. The follicular phase, and this is the week after your period, and the ovulatory phase and luteal phase, and otherwise known as PMS week. But premenstruation and PMS are actually not synonymous. PMS are symptoms of imbalances in your body. So we'll start out with the menstrual phase. Even if you are on birth control, or maybe you are past the age of having a menstrual cycle or have had complications where your cycle is irregular, we still go through these different phases. So it's important to honor them. So something that's really has a profound effect on people when they view the body and the woman's kind of phases is that men mirror the sun in that their hormones reset every single day and they show up every day on a clean slate. Women mirror the moon. The moon goes through about a 28-day cycle. So as do women. Our hormones do not reset every single day, and they are constantly at a different point. So how you begin your cycle with when you bleed, that is your day one, you are going to be a completely different person, or feeling like a completely different person on day 21. So it's important that when you start cycle syncing, which is the process of understanding where you are at, and through these next 3 weeks, I'll show you how to adjust your nutrition and your exercise to mirror where you are at and optimize your cycle and prevent those PMS symptoms. It's really important that you start to understand where you're at and kind of change and shift your life with those different cycles and phases of you. So the first week is when we bleed. It's usually from day 1 to day 5, day 7, depending on how long you are actually bleeding. A simple way to put this is think of this as your winter season. As women, we might feel like we're a little more introspective. We might start to feel like we're a little more tired and that we want to be less social. If you do experience premenstrual symptoms, you may feel really drained. It could feel like a time of month where you don't necessarily feel your most energetic, and that's completely on cue with what's happening to your hormones. estrogen and progesterone are actually really low. And what is happening, the lining of the uterus, sometimes called the endometrium, is shed, and this is what causes bleeding. I have a question here. I'm going to actually go through this and then I'll answer that for you because that is a very good question. I see it's what if you don't have a regular period and cycle? How do you track it? So think of this as your winter. What do we do in the winter? We hibernate, we eat things like soups and get all cozy, and we're a little bit more quiet and still. What is nature doing in winter? Try to mirror that. So as we go through the next couple of weeks, I'll give you self-care tips and nutrition tips and exercise tips because those should all start to adjust with these different phases. And as you start to mirror the seasons, if you will, or mirror what's going on with your body, you will start to feel a little bit more empowered rather, like I said, a victim or a slave to those fluctuations in your hormones. After you bleed, you might start to get a boost of energy as you go into what's called as the follicular phase. And this is usually around the time you stop bleeding to around day 14, so that second week of your period. And you might also call this spring season. So you're not completely your most energetic, heightened self, but you have definitely a little bit more energy than you did the week before when you were bleeding. So again, mirroring the season of spring, things are a little bit more budding, maybe you're a little bit more social, your food is a little bit more different, and it mirrors that of the types of foods that we would eat during the spring. So you can almost think of the foods that are in season during that time. I won't go too much into detail because we have a whole week in which we are dedicated to talking about nutrition. So in this follicular phase, on a hormonal level, your estrogen and your progesterone are on the rise. So this is also when you might feel like your like I had mentioned, your energy and also like you feeling a little bit more comfortable in your body starts to appear. Sometimes we notice a shift in how we view our bodies in the mirror. Probably around that first week of your period, it's probably not a comfortable experience. You might feel a little bit more insecure, and that's because your intuition and your sense of awareness is heightened. So we're a little bit more sensitive. So we're coming out of that where we're a little bit less attached to things that would have bothered us last week. So our mood starts to stabilize a little bit more as we get that increase of estrogen and progesterone. And then after that, we go into so follicular is pre-ovulatory, and then we get into ovulatory phase. This is probably around day 15 to 17. You will notice the shift in your body when you are ovulating with the shift in the fluids, the discharge that you get vaginally. You will it will almost look like egg whites, and not to be TMI, but this whole point of this whole 4-week series is to take the stigma out of all of this, because we all go through this. But I was just saying at the beginning that sometimes the last time we really paid attention to our cycle or had this education around it was in the 5th grade. And I had a client the other day actually say, like, I'm today years old and I'm 39 learning about all of these things that I've gone through over the last 20 plus years. So the way you know you're ovulating is by your vaginal discharge. And that happens midway through your cycle, about day 15 to 17. Your estrogen peaks, your testosterone and progesterone rise. So your energy is at its highest here. This is probably also when you feel the most confident. And I've had a lot of women, and I've had this experience happen to myself, will say, like, how come sometimes when I look in the mirror, I'm like totally accepting of all my body and its flaws, quote unquote. And then a couple of days later, I can look the same exact way, but in my eyes, it's almost as if my body has changed. And what you are noticing is a shift in your hormones. You don't physically see that in your body, but your body knows something has shifted. So the way you view your body is also going to change. So again, going back to being aware of these changes and shifts, this is going to create more empowerment rather than, why is this happening to me, versus you know what, like, I know this is what's happening. I can give myself a little bit more grace and compassion. So with that rise of estrogen and that rise of testosterone getting higher and higher and building, your energy high, your mood is high, you are a social butterfly. So if there are things that you've been planning to do, like a vacation or a social outing, or you wanted to host an event, or you're going on a first date, or scheduling interviews where you have to be your best and highest self, this would be the time. So start to like look and plan your life literally around your cycle. If there's like big deadlines or meetings you have with bosses, or if you run a business, this would be the time to schedule these things. So if we're mirroring the seasons, this is your summer. So you are most heightened and energetic. Your mood is most stable. You might notice, because your hormones are high, your libido is high. So this is where it's highest. Your body is actually like in the stage, like it's trying to create a baby. So people might even notice like a difference in your glow, or like something looks different about you. Your skin might be at its best. And that is also just, again, your body's in its nature, trying to, again, mirror those seasons of like how you like feel the lightest and easiest and most, best, easiest for, easiest for you to flow. So after that is when we kind of dip, and that can be a traumatic thing sometimes, where you're like, last week I was super energetic and I was on fire, and I was feeling so great in life, so confident in my body, and now I'm not feeling so hot. And that's because our estrogen and our progesterone levels are high. And then if our egg isn't fertilized, hormone levels will decrease. So if you aren't trying to conceive and create a baby, the menstrual cycle is beginning to start over again. So everything starts to dip. With everything kind of, like the estrogen and progesterone levels are at their highest, we become a little bit more sensitive. So this is where we call like PMS week. And as I said a few moments ago, PMS and premenstrual phase of our cycle are not synonymous. PMS are actually symptoms trying to tell us what is imbalanced in our body. So again, taking this standpoint of like, okay, I'm experiencing bloat, or I have a headache. So my body is trying to almost give me a check engine light of what needs to be attended to. So if, for example, you notice that your energy starts to dip around this time, this would be when you start to wean off of those social activities. Maybe not the best time to schedule a first date, or plan a social outing, or have family or friends in town, because your energy is starting to wane, and it might feel like a task that would have been more suited for your ovulatory phase when you're in your highest and best light. When we start to enter into our premenstruation phase, I always say that it's nice to kind of do like more admin or detail oriented work, because your intuition and your ability to pay attention to detail is heightened. So it might feel like you have to pinpoint everything or have serious or intense conversations because they might be bothering you. So a good practice is to just write those things down, revisit them when you aren't in such a sensitive state. And if they deserve your attention, maybe going back into that follicular or ovulatory, the spring and summer phases of your cycle, to just then tend to those things that might need the adjustment, because you have the energy and it's less of an emotional topic for you. All throughout your cycle, as we went through the kind of those 4 weeks, that last one is the fall. So again, mirroring the seasons, things start to get quiet, again, a little bit more introspective, starts to settle. There's a lot of shift and transformation that occurs during from that summer to fall progression, which is where we are actually in right now with the seasons in the physical world. So all through that, your appetite, your mood, your energy levels, all your thought processes all shift throughout. So when we have this awareness of, okay, this is where I'm at, and this is where I'm about to go, you feel like you're a little bit more in control with those changes. When we start to get into this process of cycle syncing, if this is something that you're entirely new to, it's really important to understand that this takes time. If this is something that you've never even heard of and you're interested in doing it, I encourage you to watch the rest of the series, because we will go into a little bit more detailed topics, like I mentioned, nutrition and self-care practices like supplementation, and things you can do where your period arrives and there were no symptoms to let you know, because everything just flowed through you. It takes about 3 months to see these changes. And so it's not an overnight process, but if you put in the work where you start to mirror and match what your body is going through and you get a little bit more in tune, I promise you the benefits and the rewards from this practice is something that I recommend for every single woman. We must begin to talk about this topic of our periods and taking the stigma out of it, because we can't be advocates for our own health if we can't discuss something that we all go through, half of the population. And it's if a man is watching this, or you have a husband or a partner that doesn't go through a cycle as you do as a woman, I encourage you to educate him. And if men are watching this, I think that's a great topic for men to consider, because we are very different than men as women. You become less of a victim and more in flow when you allow yourself to listen to these different shifts and kind of take an observing standpoint. So I have a question here, and that I'll answer, and that will wrap up for this week. And we're doing this series every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So what if you don't have a regular period cycle? How do you track it? So you can respond back to this, Callie, and this question, because I have a few questions for you. There could be a few reasons why you don't have a regular period and cycle, and these would require a little bit more tracking to get to understand. Is it that your period is longer and it's over 30 days, or it's unpredictable? It could be because you just got off birth control. Is this something that's happened all of your life? Do you have underlying conditions that would prevent you from kind of having that regular cycle, like PCOS or endometriosis? Have you had your hormones tested? I think a really good way to practice is if you kind of can pay attention, like, okay, I'm starting to feel XYZ. Say you feel really energized. Then you would kind of guess, like, okay, this is where I would probably be in ovulation, or I begin my period, and try to track how long on average your periods are. Say they're 30 to 40 days. How can you get them a little bit closer to that 30 mark? Because anything over would indicate that there is something that is imbalanced. So if you can figure out, like, okay, my last day, you can kind of do the math. Okay, day 1 through 7 would be my menstrual cycle. Day 7 through 14 is when I am in my follicular phase. And they might be a little bit longer for you if your cycle is longer. And write down all of the symptoms. There are tons of apps that you can use to track your period. The Apple iPhone actually has one in there. Or you can just use a journal, which I encourage a lot of clients. And you might even like notice the different changes in your mood, and that will kind of reflect the hormonal changes. So if you can think of like, okay, I'm really energized here, that's probably my summer phase. Or I'm feeling really low energy, then I'm probably in premenstruation phase. Or I'm bleeding. That's a good way to kind of figure out. Day 1 is always the day that you begin bleeding. Does that answer your question? I would be a lot more consistent, and if as you follow along through this series, you will see that your nutrition and syncing it with it and making sure that you have adequate nutrition, like a multivitamin, if you miss out on certain minerals and vitamins, and your diet can support that as well. And it will start to make your cycle more consistent. Does anybody else have any questions? I see there's a few of you that are watching live. Before I get off, I'm happy to. Yeah, it takes some time. I've probably at this point been cycle syncing for on and off for the last year, but have really gotten diligent with it in the last like 3 to 4 months. And my last 2 periods have taken me by surprise. Like I didn't even know they were coming. I had slight irritability a little bit before, and I suspected, oh, maybe in a couple of days I'm going to bleed. And then I go to the bathroom and I'm like, oh, didn't even know that was coming. Whereas before I had horrible cramping to the point where it was debilitating and I'm on my hands and knees. So, and that used to be all of my periods. But after just really like focusing on the last 2 to 3 months or so, it's not like that at all. It's taken a huge shift. If anybody has questions and I hop off and they're in the comment section, I will be happy to respond via chat. So I will see you all next week, and we will be talking about another topic of nutrition, fitness, or supplementation, and how to do self-care practices for your cycle so that it flows right through you. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and thanks for tuning in with me. Bye.